So my name is John Cutler. I'm a product evangelist at Amplitude. I'm extremely excited to introduce our speaker today, Varun Parmar from Miro. So I'm going to just tell a little story here about me and Miro to set this up. It was March 2020, and I'd done 5 conference talks in Europe, and the world was pretty unsteady at that time, and I flew back to Santa Barbara, and that was the last time I had flown. And the thing I wanted to point out is that there's very few times in your life that you use a product that actually fundamentally changes your career. And Miro was actually that product for me. So I'm a pretty social person. I like doing these workshops. I like meeting with customers. And then this whole thing hit, and I didn't really have an outlet to do that. And then I found Miro, and that became a catalyst for a lot of actually how Amplitude worked with customers, especially last year and into this year. So I think I did 140 workshops with 2,000 folks, some of you who are here, thanks to Miro. So thanks Miro, which existed also before Varun, too, and then thanks for Varun doing that. But when we were thinking about this talk, we thought, who better to describe the crazy act of becoming a product leader at a company that was in the middle of just incredible growth, but also expansion, larger enterprises thinking about how to use Miro, and complexity, cultural complexity, so coming from San Francisco to going to Amsterdam, cultural complexity of having a team that was really gelling, the founder-led team, Andre-and team, and then whoops, up pops this San Francisco guy with experience from EMC and Adobe and Box coming into the picture. So we thought, well, what better person to talk about the challenges of product leadership and really these lessons from Uncharted growth. So with that, Varun, take it away.
Thanks so much, John, for those kind words, and welcome everyone. When John and I were talking about sort of how we want to structure this session, what we thought we would do is essentially break it up into 2 parts. The first one is I'll probably walk you through my top 5 lessons, having been at Miro for about a year now. And then we will actually take some questions. John's going to kickstart, and then we would love to get some audience participation. So with that, let's get started. So hopefully folks are aware of Miro, but maybe show of hands, how many of you do not know Miro actually? The other way around. 2, 3, okay, so less than 5% or so, so that's great to hear. But for those of you, the 4 or 5 folks in the audience, Miro is a tool that is enabling visual collaboration, and essentially the idea is that you have a single canvas, a shared digital workspace where you can bring your teams together to get work done. And so the way we think about the platform is that we are enabling teams to create the next big thing. We are an innovation platform that allows teams to synchronously as well as asynchronously work together to create the things that they want to focus on. So as a company, we've been around for about 11 years now, so been around the block for a while. And really fortunate that we are used by almost every single one of the Fortune 100 companies. I think there is one customer that, one Fortune 100 that doesn't use us, so that's why it's 99%. And we're hoping that we can actually get them to move to the platform pretty soon. But what's really fascinating and humbling for a product person is the love and affection that you get from the users. And you heard John sort of passionately talk about how Miro transformed how he was doing work during the past 2 years of the pandemic. But ever since the category of visual collaboration was created, or whiteboarding, we've been the #1 player in that category every single year. And here are some great logos. Obviously, really amazing to see folks at Amplitude use Miro to get work done and collaborate both in person as well as remote. But there are a host of other brands, some of them listed out here, that use Miro as well. And what's fascinating is that we now have close to 35 million people on the platform. So that's really amazing. And it's really the feedback that we get from users that basically drives the roadmap around what we are building. And that's exactly what we are here to talk about, right? So we're going to spend the next maybe 15, 20 minutes. I'll share my top 5 lessons having been at Miro, like I said, for about a year, and then we'll go into a Q&A. All right. Okay, so lesson number 1 is to explicitly define the destination before embarking on the journey. It's a very, very simple concept, but I think it's very powerful. So what has happened over the past, like I would say 15 years or so, is the advent of Agile, where everything needs to be looked at in terms of bite-sized chunks, right? So if there's like a big project, you have to break it up, and then you have to make incremental progress. What that led to is that many teams now start to think about projects in very sort of small chunks of work, right? Where you go to them and they're like, hey, I want to run an experiment. Well, why do you want to run an experiment? I want to run an experiment because I want to see if this capability is valuable to the users. Well, why are you building this capability? Well, we think that this is going to drive engagement. Well, what are the metrics you're going to use? These are the metrics you're going to use. And what ends up happening is that a large number of teams inside of your organization start to do these small incremental projects where the teams don't know what the end goal is. And when we think about designing new experiences or new capabilities or new enhancements to the platform in Miro, what we think about is first and foremost, what's the destination? Where do you want to go? So think about it. Like, let's say you're from the Bay Area, right? So let's say you live in Palo Alto, and you're trying to take a journey. The first thing you ask yourself is, what's the destination? You're trying to go to San Francisco, right? So you're trying to go from Palo Alto to San Francisco. And Agile is the mechanism by which you're going to decide which freeways and exits you're going to take. But Agile is not what determines what the destination is. And many times what we find in software teams, teams that are building products, they forget what the destination is. So at Miro, the first and fundamental question that we ask every single product team is, what's your destination? And we encapsulate that into a concept we call painted picture. It's not something that we invented. Our friends at Atlassian are the ones that actually came up with this concept. So every product team writes a painted picture. And usually it's a 1 or a 2 or a 3-page document which explains what the destination is, along with the metric and the approximate targets that you need to achieve. So, So that's the first thing we do, which is make sure that every single product team, when they're thinking about what is the next thing that they're working on, that they write this painted picture. And it's OK to actually have ballpark targets for the metrics that you want to achieve. So they'll say, well, we want to drive this particular metric. It could be weekly active editors on a given Miro board. And it's like, OK, what's the target for it? And, well, we don't know what the target is. But you have all of these proxies that you can look at. And so that's what defines the destination, which is what's the end goal you're trying to achieve, what's the metric, and what's the target, and then the shared belief that that's the thing that we want to focus on as a bet. So that's the first lesson, is starting with the destination. The next one is again a very simple concept, but I think it's quite powerful in the sense that the way we think about building great experiences, which is, great products or great product experiences are built by teams that care. And I think it's quite profound in the sense that oftentimes we say, there are 3 things that sort of teams focus on in terms of the outcomes. The first one is obviously the people or the team. The second one is the process, right? The approach that you're taking, what methodology, et cetera, that you're using. And then the third one is, what is the tool that you're going to use in the team? So it's people, process, and tools. What people don't talk about is that when you look at the outcomes and you map them to these 3 categories, 80% of the success of the product or the initiative that you're working on is based on the people, on the team. The remaining 20% is based on process and tools. And of that remaining 20%, it's another 80-20. It's another Pareto where 16% is based on process and only 4% is based on tools. So 80% on people, 16% on process, 4% on tools. That's the fundamental observation in terms of what all of you as leaders, as folks who are driving innovation projects in your respective companies need to think about. At Miro, as a result of that, we focus a lot in terms of the people, right? The amount of time that we spend in hiring people, right? So there's a very well-defined process, and everyone that comes in needs to do what we call as a take-home assignment, right? Which is a very well-structured problem statement that we give to every single person. Every single person, including myself, had to do that. It's around the product. You have to use the product You have to figure out the strategy for an area. You have to come up with a couple of features that you improve. And then you put all of this presentation together in a Miro board, and you basically share it with Miro. And then the entire interview process is around what you have recommended. Your observations around our strategy, your observations around our product, your observations around features that we need to improve. And then the journey doesn't stop there. That's just the input metric, right? How you get people into the company. And then we spend a lot of time in training and enabling and supporting folks inside of Miro to make sure that they're world-class at whatever they're doing, and then actively manage people in terms of regular reviews and feedback mechanisms and stuff. And I think this is extremely important, is that always be looking at the talent in your organization to make sure that these teams are high-performing and they're working towards the outcomes that your organization desires. So that's lesson number 2. The next lesson is again a very simple concept. As you can tell, all of these are simple concepts, but I think they collectively have a huge impact in terms of how the organization operates, which is once you have the destination defined and you have a high-performing team, then what needs to happen is that groups of individuals or multiple teams need to come together in order for the outcome to be delivered, for the business outcome to be delivered. And there are 2 concepts when you're working with people, right? There is the concept of commitment, and there is the concept of consent. I can get consent from each and every person in this room. And the way I do that is, I'll come and I'll talk to you, I'll try to convince you. Some of you get convinced, others don't. And we have this really amazing concept in corporate America around disagree and commit. And that's consent, right? So, I can literally out here, for the sake of compliance, can get consent from each and every one of you. However, I cannot get commitment. And that is an important concept, which is commitment can only be given. I cannot take commitment from you. You can only give me commitment. You can give me consent, right? I can take, consent from you, but I cannot take commitment from you. Commitment can only be given. And for initiatives that are extremely important for the organization, that are needle movers, that are big things that you're trying to do, either in the product, for the business, whatever it is, but you deem that to be extremely important, what is critical for you as leaders to do is seek commitment and not consent. And the reason for that is quite simple. The reason is that that person, whoever is the team leader, the group manager, the director, the VP, whoever that person is, when they go start talking to their organization, the folks that actually report to them, they are the ones who are actually going to drive the implementation, the strategy, the approach, the follow-through on that action item. So it's very important that in those conversations, they don't say, this is the thing that Varun wanted to do, as opposed to, I believe in this, and I believe that this is the right thing to do. And my apologies, for some reason the laptop is going in the sleep mode. So that's the thing that we try to do, is that when we identify really critical initiatives, and these could be any initiatives, not just product initiatives, we make sure that we are explicit around, is this the initiative where we want to drive consent in the organization, or do we need commitment? And if you need commitment, it could take 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, whatever it takes. You have to invest the time, the effort, the energy to make sure that you're getting the commitment. But when you do, then the outcomes are going to be amazing, because that person who's the leader for this initiative is going to drive this across the organization in terms of the outcome, because they fundamentally believe in it, and they have to believe in it, and you have to convince them. Otherwise, it's not a good idea to move forward with. And we often find that there are certain initiatives where we can get commitments from leaders that we want, in which case we deprioritize them. Okay, so that was the third lesson. The next one is speed as a competitive differentiator for your organization. And I think this may or may not be applicable to every single organization or individual in this room, but it is definitely applicable to companies that are trying to invent new things in this world. So let me take a step back. I think fundamentally I believe that there are only very few companies in the world that are doing net new things. For the most part, people are taking existing problems and existing solutions and making them better. Let's look at the past 15 to 18 years of innovation that has happened in software as a service or cloud computing and stuff. Every single category that actually existed on-prem got moved to the cloud. So the innovation there was you building stuff for the cloud, but you know for the most part what the problem is, you know for the most part what the solution is, and obviously you're doing tons of innovation, but it is not a net new thing that you're trying to create. When Miro was created by Andre, who's our founder and CEO, about 11 years ago, he was creating something that was net new. There was nothing that existed like this. So when you think about collaboration and you're like, oh, there used to be Microsoft Office, and then there was Google Docs, and it's like, yeah, that was great, amazing, but it was the document metaphor, and people used to create documents and they used to share, and Google innovated around that, and that's amazing. Or there used to be the SharePoints of the world, and companies like Box and Dropbox and others came in and they moved that solution to the cloud. And it's great in terms of innovation, but it's more incremental than something that's net new. In the case of Miro, we are trying to solve problems that are net new. There is no proxy that I can look at or anyone else in the product organization can look at to say, this is what great looks like in terms of what we need to model this feature around. When you're operating in these environments, almost always you are hiring people and you're onboarding these people into the organization who obviously don't have context in terms of what the platform does. They may know a little bit about the platform. But at the same time, they might not know what is the right solution that needs to be built in terms of the platform and the next steps we want to take. So then it is very important, and this is like a key concept that we practice, is that once you decide on the destination and you're like, this is a go on this particular initiative, you have to move really, really fast. And the reason for that is that because you do not know what the answer is. When you're in situations where you don't know what the answer to a problem is, it is better to be wrong fast than to be right really, really late. And the reason for that is all of us are in competitive environments where everybody's looking around their adjacencies and they're saying, what else can I be doing? How else can I expand my market share? And how else can I grow the product? And so it's always better to be the first one to hit the brick wall. And the definition of a brick wall is that you've hit a dead end where it's not the answer you were looking for. But if you're the first person who hits the brick wall and you can turn left or right, whatever hypothesis you have, then you'll always be in a better position, always be a couple of steps ahead of competition, and you can get to better outcomes. And this is something that we practice. So we have a concept called deliver customer value faster with high quality. So there are 3 concepts in it: customer value, high quality, and move fast. And there are specific metrics that we measure for every single team. And then based on the size of the initiative, we track that. So we've got close to 90 Scrum teams at Miro, and we are tracking this metric, and we have leaderboards in terms of where people are on this particular metric. So speed as a competitive differentiator, very important. So finally, the last concept is very simple again, but I think is extremely important. And I have Andre here, who's a friend of mine, and last night we were having dinner, and I was mentioning this concept to him, is that over a period of time, when you look at your product, right, your product is either getting better every single day, or it's getting worse. Your product is never remaining the same. It's never constant. Just you have to think about this. Every time you ship something in the product, if there is a net new experience that is being exposed to the end user, and it doesn't have to be front-end facing, it could be back-end, it might have performance and other implications. You are either making the product experience better, or you're making the product experience worse. And very rarely, obviously it happens, so it's not like never, but very rarely the product is actually remaining just constant. And when you deeply understand that, you deeply start caring about every single thing that you're shipping, and you have to raise the bar on every single feature or enhancement that you're shipping out in the platform. And if you do that, that's when magic starts to happen. That's when you start to invoke some of the emotions that the end users have when they play with Miro starts to happen. And I have this great example. I don't know, those of you who own a Tesla or driven one recently and stuff, they over the past, I would say, 4 or 5 years have really perfected, the interface around how do you interact with the maps when you're doing the directions inside of your car. And they incrementally chipped away at the problem. And you could see every single software update, they were making it more better. And obviously, it's a very complex problem to drive because to solve for, because you have a driver that's driving, and you want to minimize the number of distractions on the screen. So the interface, the user experience is extremely important. What happened was that about 4 or 5 months ago, they had a massive update on the platform, a huge update. And they completely changed the interface. And a lot of the great learnings that they had from the past 4 or 5 years, they set aside, and the product, went from something that was great to something that was not great. And then over the past 5 months, again, those of you who probably played with it, they've done like 4 updates to the platform, and they have completely rolled back all the changes that they made in terms of the interface, obviously, except for some UX updates, visual updates, but everything was that. So you had a product that was doing great, and then it went down, and now after like 6 months, it's out here. So everything that you do with the product, every single small interaction is either making the product better or worse. And I think those are the 5 lessons, yeah. I guess.
Awesome. That was great. Thank you. Absolutely. So we're 19. Oh, we've put aside a lot of time. We're going to do some audience questions too. I have Nicole and then someone from the event staff who will help too. So think of some questions, but I have a couple questions to get started.
Yes.
I think that both Amplitude and Miro, in a sense, run up against some kind of company culture blocks. And in Amplitude's case, it might be maybe wanting to share data. And in Miro's case, it might be, should we really let 50 people in to brainstorm together and to be more transparent together? And I was curious, even when you advise your own customers or your own team, how do you get them over the hump? How do you create that kind of change?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, John. I think the one fundamental thing around Miro is that we are a bottoms sort of up adoption play, which means that we never go to an organization where there aren't active users of Miro that are extremely passionate, as defined by active use metrics, where they already have 1 or more use cases where Miro is being used for.
Yep.
So in those situations, it's more around sort of the optimizations around the corner. So it's like 1 degree north and 2 degrees south, as opposed to massive transformations in terms of how they think about things and changes and rolling out change management inside of the organization. So I think in many ways, John, the problem for us is a lot simpler, where all we are doing is talking about best practices that we see for companies of their size and for the use cases that they're trying to solve for. But fundamentally, Miro is a collaboration product, and the value of the collaboration product is exponentially increased as the number of users inside of that collaboration network increases. So if you have 2 people, then it's like n to the power of 2 in terms of the benefits that you get. And obviously, once you have a lot of people and you're trying to do things like workshops, then you worry about folks stepping on each other's toes and so on and so forth. So there are a bunch of like best practices that we've encapsulated in terms of our templates and in terms of guidance that you can get in training and videos and other things that we make available. But I think like generally, like that's the approach we take, and we don't tend to see like too many challenges there. Yeah.
I think that's even a lesson in itself, right? That if you're treating change as a product in your company, you can't force it on people. You have to find those. Like I was that person at Amplitude. Yeah, and I would annoy my teammates and like send them the links to do these things. Cool. So one thing I've wondered about is again a little bit about the culture clash that might have existed. I mean, I think Melissa might be here, but Melissa in 2020 we were at a conference in Manchester and we talked with the founder of Miro, and he said to Melissa like, should we hire a CPO? And Melissa I think said, yeah, I think you should hire a CPO. And then you joined this company that had really progressed a fairly long way in the midst of this pandemic. They're going strong, has a strong culture. Everyone I've met there, incredible. We did that North Star workshop together. How did you approach culture? You must have walked in and been like, these people are crazy. It's a cult, right? And then in other things, you might have been their geniuses. So how did you approach the culture clash initially as a leader?
Yeah, so maybe I'll take a step back and I'll say like anytime when you join a new organization, you have to be very explicit around sort of the areas that you're getting involved versus not. And there's really interesting story, like, there's this architect that goes to a college, and there's the president of the college, and the president says like, hey, I want you to design the sidewalks, right? So there's this new campus we built, but as an architect, I want you to design these sidewalks. What do you need to get started? And the architect goes, I need a ladder. And it's like, why do you need a ladder? He's like, because I want to climb the tallest building out here, and I want to observe where the students are going. And wherever they're going is where I'm going to build those sidewalks, right? And so I think that concept actually is quite true in the case of someone like me or any one of you. When you go join a new organization, you have to get the ladder to climb up and see what are the areas where you feel you can actually add value, and where do you need to wait and watch and see and learn, how the organization is.
We want an example too. Like, what did you notice about the well-worn walks at Miro where you're like, okay?
Yeah, I think there are a few things, like, when you join a company like Miro, which is, hyper growth, and when you look at the metrics, they are quite phenomenal in terms of like the growth and stuff. The first thing you go in and you say is like, don't screw up. Like, it's just like, you're in like, let me just learn what the secret sauce is, what the reason for this amazing success is, going from like literally 2 million to 35 million in a matter of less than 2 years. Like, that was the growth trajectory, is to just wait and watch and see some of those things. But like, first of all, I would say, Miro is very data driven. So anything that is done in the product or outside the product has data to back it up. I think the second thing is, as a culture, we are very explicit around things as opposed to implicit. So, there are lots of things that you do as an organization, which is like, oh, this is how it's done. Like, oh, you do onboarding, and like, onboarding is something that the manager does, and like as an organization, you don't think about it. It's like, no. There are certain things that we believe are extremely important because it directly impacts the product, and we are a product-led company. So every employee that actually comes in needs to be trained around the product and understand like what the use cases are. So we are very explicit around certain things, and that was actually another thing, is like when you onboard, there's like, 500 documents you have to read, because everything has a reason behind it, and a rationale, and an approach, and a justification, and it's all documented for you inside of the organization. So that would be another thing. And then I think like the final thing is that basically attracting and retaining talent is actually a big thing. Like I mentioned, the first sort of lesson was, great product experiences are built by teams that care. And so how do you find people that actually care around these things? So that's actually a huge area of investment, and we have approaches and methodologies, and at some point maybe we'll start to write white papers and blog posts around these things. And that was another thing that sort of I observed.
Cool. Last question, and then we'll go to, there's been this idea of a document culture. And then I think with Miro, there's like a board culture. There's a board for everything. I've got this board, all these things. Do you all get sick of using Miro? When do you write a document, and then when do you use a board?
Yeah. Great question. Yeah.
Or present. Well, we don't use presentations anymore. We don't.
Yeah. By the way, this was done in Miro. So interactive presentations is one of the use cases that we're building in Miro. So
I haven't used slides for a year, so yeah, it works.
Yeah. I think obviously we drink our own champagne as one would expect. So everything that we do starts off with a Miro board. The product that we built is really amazing for the early phases of sort of the entire development life cycle, where you're trying to ideate and where you're trying to come up with strategy and alignment and workshops and so on and so forth. So sort of the early stages of the innovation cycle. But then after every single workshop, after every single strategy presentation, you need to document things, because now you need to broadcast at scale, and you need a structured file format to actually do that. So obviously, in those cases, for those specific use cases, we translate things into documents and we share it out. But I think like that's a critical component of like sort of wrapping up the entire cycle of doing the ideation and then communicating the next steps, the to-dos, and alignment across the organization, so that generally happens there as well.
Yeah, just as a follow-up for that, when we were speaking before, I mean, teams can get lost. It's like if a workshop happens and there's no action items, it's like a tree falling in a forest, right? Like no one did it even exist.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're very intentional. You'll diverge. You'll do this like ideally facilitated workshop that works well in Miro, but it sounds like you really push to action items afterwards.
Yes, we do. Yep. For sure.
Awesome. So we wanted to leave time for questions. There's folks on both sides, but yeah, just raise your hand and don't ask the question until there's a mic in your hand and it's turned on. Yeah, sure. Oh, I point. Yeah, I was supposed to point too. Yeah, right spot.
Hi there. I'm curious how you balance shipping features at speed with being data-driven, running the extra experiment, taking the extra time to do user research. You know, the two are typically don't work together very well.
Yeah. No, I think like there's no silver bullet to it. I think like that's probably the best answer here. But generally what we do is that we divide sort of the product development process into sort of two phases. There is the initial phase where we're trying to define what the destination is. And to define the destination, we actually take some time. So we're not rushing through it, right? So it's like, oh, what are you trying to build? Why are we trying to do it? Is this going to move the needle? Is this a real problem? Who else is trying to do it? Why do we have permission to get into the space? How will the user journey work? Like, have you done some sort of user research and so on and so forth? So that process, the first phase, is generally not where we are trying to run fast. But once we've actually defined what the destination is, and we've all agreed to what success metrics look like, and we've said, this is what we want to build, that's when we want to go really, really fast and either prove or disprove the hypothesis. So this notion of speed as a competitive differentiator comes in once you said, this is where we want to go, and it's like, move really, really fast. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's also the velocity of what. You know, so there's sort of shipping velocity and learning velocity, and you're saying when you talk about move as quickly as possible, it's learn as fast as possible.
Yes.
To do the same. Yeah. Awesome.
Another question over here.
Yeah. Hey, Varun. So you said that the product was going down, and then it stabilized. We as founders, like at times when things like this happen, we get into a very, very stupid zone where we think maybe we're not good enough. We don't know what product management is. We probably should get a professional to do this. But this happened to you. How do you deal with it? Because I would not know. I would say, let's fire a senior product manager. Let's get my co-founder to shut up and not do product anymore. And to be honest, that's the conversation we have been having in the last 5 days. How do you, like, he's telling me I'm not good enough.
You're in Vegas now. You can just relax too for a little bit.
No, I'm super serious. Like, and you just said it that, you know, it went down and now it's stable. So all the hard work, all the hypothesis, and the cost, not with respect to money, but with respect to time. So how do you react in such situations?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. By the way, like the example I was giving was more for Tesla, not for Miro. So just so we're clear.
You can give it.
That's right, yeah. But I think like there are a few things, like you mentioned founders, and I think like I have a belief around founders, which is they are extremely exceptional. And they are exceptional for a few things, but one of the biggest one is their tenacity to just power through. Tenacity to power through in founders is unprecedented. So I think if you have a mental model as a product person when you're working with the founder, like let's take the scenario that you were talking about, and you understand what the founder brings in, which is, you know, they created this product. In our case, they created this category. They invented this product line. They built a massively successful business and so on and so forth, is that you want to learn around like their instincts, and you want to learn around the why behind why they're sort of proposing it, and then treat them as a subject matter expert. So the sort of the silver bullet that has worked for me over the years, and I've worked with multiple founders. I was the chief product officer for Box prior to this, and I had the good fortune of working with another founder CEOs, and I think like being a head of product in a founder CEO company is an extremely difficult role, extremely. It's one of the hardest things that you can do because by definition, the founder CEO is the head of product. They built the product. It's their vision, it's their baby, and so on and so forth. So the framework that I have used, and it's actually worked very well, is that whenever they're interacting, whenever they're in the room, you treat them as a subject matter expert, and you declare it to the rest of the organization that we have a SME here who has very strong perspectives, who has very strong gut feeling, who has very strong experience, but it is just a subject matter expert that is giving their perspective. We're going to run the process. We're going to do the things that we believe is the right things to do. And then we're going to incorporate the things that actually make sense and then iterate through it. So that's the approach that we take.
Got it. Thanks.
Cool. Next question. I guess here on the inside row, I don't know if we can get. Oh, thanks, Nicole.
Hi,
Hi. So my question relates to one of your earlier points in your presentation about products either going up or down. While I do appreciate the call to action that provides, where do you find nuance in that framework? So for example, as products get more complex, user groups differentiate. We heard earlier today that there's no generic user. How do you and the team make decisions around product changes that might improve experience for one demographic of user, but not improve it for another?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think it's as much a business strategy question, I would say, as it is a product strategy question, if you will. If you are trying to serve multiple personas and those personas have diverging needs that are greater than converging needs, then you are obviously introducing complexity in the product and the experience because there are multiple masters that you're trying to serve, right? If you have a business strategy that is very clear and it's working, then generally you don't run into those scenarios that much. But there are some situations where you run into those. When we run into those, we at least at Miro, the way we think about it is that we think about persona-based journeys. And it's something that we are starting to focus a lot more, and you'll see that in the product actually emerge, where we try to have the user self-identify themselves into a specific persona. And then we built a product against that persona because we know the use cases and the flows and the capabilities for that persona. And we then tend to guide the user experience around that particular persona. So in terms of like a very hard and a tactical answer to what you're saying is, if there is a way in which you can introduce in the product, like identifying upfront in the journey when the user is onboarding what their persona is, or if you already have tons and tons of users, to go back to them and say, identify yourself one of these 5 things, and do it in a very simple, elegant, intuitive, non-intrusive ways, the user will tell you. And when they tell you, you can actually present an interface, and you can slowly and gradually start to present an interface where certain capabilities, might not be as highlighted as the others, and the things that they would care about, you would actually try to optimize that. So that's sort of the way we think
I think
of
also
it.
too, it's just beware of fooling yourself into thinking you can peanut butter the strategy across all of them and it will work. And I think that's where, Amplitude or just deep UX research, you have the personas you have. So you can fool yourself into thinking that you can make them all happy, but that's what gives that feeling that like everything feels like it's getting a little better, but it's really getting worse, is when you're making everyone just marginally happier, but you're just introducing a lot of essentially just product debt into the thing. I think it's a tough question. In the front.
No, we only have 2.5 minutes left.
Yeah,
This
2.5.
hand went up first, so this is going to be our last question right here.
Front row. Or right behind you. Let's go.
Oh, no, this hand was waiting on the last. You're going to cut it?
Oh, no,
Okay.
someone's in the back already. Someone go. No, you. Yeah, okay, let's go for it. I don't know where she's. Oh, sorry, I made you all run around. Yeah.
I hope my last question is a good one. My question is just around energy. Like you mentioned the high growth of Miro, just going from 2 million to 35 million. It's an assumption that the team must be working really, really hard, right, to manage those growth periods. So how did you manage energy in the team and prevent burnout, all of those things?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's hard to be in hypergrowth because of the demands that the users are placing on you. But the way I think we do it is I think like there's like a 3-point formula. Like the first one is treating it as a privilege. Like I feel that it is a privilege that I'm part of the product team at Miro because it is allowing me to do my life's work, right? So I've been a product person for 22 years, and I've shipped a bunch of collaborative products. Some of them were successful, some of them not so much. But very rarely, I think it's like once in a lifetime opportunity as a professional, you get a platform where you can drive impact at human scale, right? And obviously, if you're in a consumer company, lots and lots of them that we know, you get that opportunity. But on the business side, like scaling a platform that maybe one day will have about 500 million people on the platform is just a rare opportunity. So I think the first one is reminding everyone, and just it's maybe a little bit of a mind jujitsu that it's a privilege. So when they complain about something, you say it's a privilege, and then you reinforce that. So that's one.
Every time.
Yes. I think the second one is being very explicit around sort of how you build products, and we mentioned some of these things around, when do we activate things and having alignment around it, and if it's a strategic thing, it's not consent, it's a commitment, and if we don't get the commitment, we don't do it. And I think over a period of time, people tend to appreciate that. They believe that you are operating from a set of principles that make a lot of sense, and they want to be associated with a company, and they want to spend their time in the company that actually has those principles that they believe in. And you have to make sure that anytime you go off track from those principles, you publicly acknowledge that you're doing that, and you get back on track. So I think like there's a trust that starts to build when you have a great framework. And I think like the third one is just like introducing fun into the culture. So we have lots and lots of rituals in terms of breaking the monotony of like long hours and a lot of hard work. Like we are a big believers in offsites. Every quarter, like there's an offsite. Like every team is doing an offsite, and they go to some exotic place, and they're having fun, and they're bonding, and they're actually working really hard, and it's long hours, but it doesn't feel like work. And as an example, like we have like bunch of activities on Fridays. We have Friday wins and so on and so forth. So there's usually in every single campus all over the world where we have an office, like there's usually an event happening on a Friday, to just celebrate and de-stress and like just have fun and stuff. And we try to be very explicit around that. Like there's actually teams that actually work around that, and like when to do what, and how to do it, and how to drive energy and so on and so forth. So I would say mixing a little bit of play into work. So that would be the third thing.
Great. So that's the conclusion of this session. Thank you so much, Varun.
Thank you.
That
Thank you,
was
John.
an honor to be able to do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.